You must have heard about containers, and each time you hear about containers, you hear about Docker as well. Docker is a platform that lets you package your application into containers. It's a software that allows you to virtualize the operating system. Now, a typical software project has your source code files, has some dependencies, that's the libraries that the application depends on, and a bunch of other configuration files. Now, all of these are packaged into the application. So for you to run the application, you need to have all these files. When you have another developer that needs to set up this application in order to contribute to the project, they need to get the source files, they need to make sure they have all the dependencies, that's all the libraries, and make sure the versions match so that it works in the code, and also have their configuration files. So this works for you to get new developers onto your project and for you guys to work together. Now, once you've built your application and you need to run it in production, which in most cases, production is being run by a different set of team members. You need to give them the source code, you need to give them a list of all the dependencies and configuration files they need for them to run that application on the server. Now, for libraries and dependencies, you can have a package manager. But what that means is that each time these developers go back, make changes, use new libraries, update to newer versions of existing libraries, those running your application in production need to also make the same changes. And a single application may have lots and lots of dependencies. So you can see how that can create a problem for running your code in production. Even for developers, when they have to now constantly update these packages, it becomes a problem. And this is what Docker solves. Docker allows you to package your application, your source code, your libraries into a single container, which can now be taken and run on different machines. So when a developer joins your team, all they need to do is to run your container, is to take the image and run it as a container. Once they do that, they have everything because the container contains everything that's required to run your code successfully. For production, each time a new version of the application is built, it's packaged into a new image. And then this image can now be run as a container in production. So you don't need to handle the issue of building or finding new libraries because everything is packaged into a single unit. So let's assume you need to travel, but instead of packaging your things in your box, you take individual items by hand, right? So you take everything in your hand, you get to the airport, you give it over to the people handling luggage. So they take your individual items and just throw them into the plane. And every other passenger on that plane does the same thing. Everyone throws the items into the plane. You successfully get to where you're going to, you've come off board and you need to get your items back. You can imagine how hard that would be, as everybody would need to go and look for their shoes, look for their brush, look for every item of clothing. It just gets messy. Now, this is how developers were running application development in the past. But with containers, it allows you to take your application and its dependencies and wrap them into a single unit. And anyone that needs to join that project can get the whole code and its dependencies as a single unit. And for production, each time there's a new version of your application, it can be taken and executed on the server without the need to bother about what the individual dependencies are, because it's all wrapped up in a single image which are run as containers on the server. So Docker lets you package your application and dependencies into a single unit. It's more or less like an OS level virtualization. Now, in the past, in addition to handling these libraries individually and your code, you had to configure bare metal servers. So you had a server and you had to come in there, install the libraries, copy your source code there, and then deploy it. But then came along virtual machines, which let you, virtualize the hardware. So you could have a single server and have several virtual machines running in there and then deploy your application on each virtual machine. But then you still had the problem of making sure that you maintain and updated your libraries for each virtual machine. But with containers and OS level virtualization, your application is packaged into a single unit, right? Using OS level virtualization. So this makes it easier for you to package your application and makes it more portable. So why use containers? Why use Docker? Because containers make it easier for you to package your application as a single unit, which means it makes it more portable. It makes it easier for developers to join and get up and running when they join your project. And it also makes it easy for you to run DevOps. Containers lend themselves to microservices architecture as well. Containers are a must-have if you're dealing with microservices architecture. There are three things you need to know when you're talking about Docker: the Docker file, the image, and the container. The Docker file contains code which gives instructions on how to create an image, while an image is a snapshot which contains your application, the dependencies, up to the operating system level. Now, when you run an image on a server, it's run as a container, which is your actual application now running. So thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Thanks to all those who subscribed from our last video. We moved from 10 subscribers to 14 subscribers. Now, don't forget, the target is to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of this month. So if you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed, please do so now.